Recording in progress.
Welcome back, everyone. Jeff Robertson here to chair this session. I understand we're accepting some feedback on the public comment period for our financial services sector standard, and we'll be hearing from Claire Dugan and Helka. Please take it away.
Thank you. This is Helka Buitrago from staff, and I'm going to be co-presenting with my colleague Claire Dugan, who's the lead for this project. It's the item 16, and we are sharing with you a bit of the highlights of the feedback we have received during the PCP of Financial Services Sector Standards. As you know, we are planning to bring this for your decision in May next year, so we thought this was a good time to continue building the understanding of what has been next year. So for this session, I am going to present an overview of the effort we did to reach out to stakeholders for the consultation, highlights on what we have received, and Claire is going to give more information about the feedback in particular, and then happy to have your questions or comments afterwards. So, yes, so this slide summarizes the outreach that we did for this PCP. It went from March till May. So we had 25 sessions that we organized either ourselves or with others, and we reached in particular 1,300 people. So we had the global webinars, we have regional meetings. Some of them were translated upon request as well. We had country meetings where also some of them were in original languages, and then 5 sector-specific meetings, in particular with dedicated actors of the banking, capital markets, and insurance sectors. And we had also other meetings that helped us to bring the message about this consultation in a wider way. In terms of the responses per region, we had 94 formal submissions overall. Different actors could also give feedback. One person could give feedback to the 3 standards. And we basically, most of them came online via the survey, but we also received 11 letters or emails. And you can see from this graph that we have participation from all the regions in this consultation. Then in terms of stakeholder constituency, here also you see the different percentages per category. We also received then input from all the different stakeholders. And on the right side of the slide, you see that we had 69 responses for banking, 46 for capital markets, and 29 for insurance. And I think this distribution also shows a bit of the maturity, if you want, of the sectors in terms of sustainability as well. You see much more banking and capital markets much more engaged in sustainability issues than insurance in general globally. And this is like just to give a bit of a flavor of where was the attention or what captured more the attention of stakeholders. Of course, this is also influenced by the questions that we posed. We had particular questions on particular topics. Claire is going to share with us about what are these cross-cutting topics, but climate change, financial health and inclusion, which would be a new topic for these standards. Then incorporating sustainability, local communities, biodiversity, and conflict-affected areas were the topics that received most comments. And with that, I'm happy to give the floor to my colleague, Claire.
Thanks, Helka, and great to be speaking with you all today. So as Helka mentioned, you have received item 16 in advance of this meeting. And with my slides over the next few minutes, I plan to just give you a little more insight into the substance of the PCP feedback, walk you through some of those common themes and key pieces that we received on the exposure drafts. I think it's really important to note that we're currently in the process of considering all these comments in conjunction with the technical committees. So of this feedback that I'm presenting today, it's not necessarily going to be incorporated into the final standard, or at least all of it, but it is all currently under consideration by the technical committees. So on this slide, you can see some of the key pieces of cross-cutting feedback that were received, a number of calls for alignment and integration with other frameworks, a recommendation for us to provide some mappings with other commonly used frameworks by these sectors. There were a number of comments about data availability and feasibility, so the volume of disclosures that's being asked, as well as the granularity, and the challenges that financial institutions may face in accessing this data. On that one, we have had discussions, some lively discussions with the technical committees, and the direction of travel there is largely to maintain the level of ambition within these standards. You know, we recognise, or the technical committees recognise the challenges for data reporting, but also sector standard reporting are recommendations only. And so they see GRI playing a really important role here in terms of advancing the agenda and the expectations on transparency from the sector. And there were a number of calls for practical guidance to be provided as part of this project after the standards are published, specifically sort of case studies illustrating how the reporting might look, a number of calls for guidance on materiality assessments. I think this is something that financial institutions, well, I'm seeing they're really struggling with this, you know, this connection to all other economies, real economy sectors, and analysing their portfolios in a rigorous way to come up with a high quality materiality assessment. It seems to be an overwhelming challenge for organisations. Next slide, please. So we also received feedback on the scope of these sector standards as well as the sector profiles. There was overwhelming support for the inclusion of investment activities, both in the banking sector standard and the insurance sector standard, so that banking and insurance organisations can use a single sector standard when reporting on both their usual operations and also their investment activities. There was some feedback to better reflect sort of emerging business models in the sectors, specifically sort of digital business models, and some questions on sort of clarifications of terminology, and also to better highlight the role of reinsurers, as well as expectations on intermediaries in the insurance sector, agents and brokers, which are covered by the scope of the standards. Important to note that none of these pieces of feedback really represent a change in scope, but rather asking for more emphasis on certain activities or types of organisation in the sector profiles. Next slide. Just to recap, in case you've forgotten, I know you've seen a lot of content since these went to public exposure, but these sector standards do have this section on incorporating sustainability that sits outside the likely material topics and elicits sort of foundational or very important contextual information from banks and capital markets organisations that provides that information to their likely material topics. There was a lot of support to keep this section. We're going to dive into some of the specific feedback in a moment. If you remember, the structure was slightly different on the insurance sector standard. It instead had this overarching piece on identifying impacts from customers and investees that sat outside the likely material topic. And then it had a separate likely material topic on sustainability and investment. So that was the result of technical committee recommendations based on public comment feedback, or the public comment feedback really suggests to align the structure in the insurance sector standard with that of the banking and capital markets. So I think it's quite possible that we'll see a more aligned structure across all three standards in the final versions. Next slide. So diving now into just some of the feedback we received on this incorporating sustainability section, there was a lot. So a number of respondents pointed to sort of the governance and accountability disclosures, really asking to prioritise governance roles over some of the metrics that point to full-time equivalents or headcounts. And a number asking for more disclosures on sort of the qualifications or sustainability training that these governance positions are receiving or have. There are a number of portfolio sort of indicators or disclosures in this section, and we received a lot of feedback on those. A number of respondents asking for sort of clear yes/no disclosures on the financing of harmful sectors, or consolidating such policies in a single place rather than at the moment a number of likely material topics ask for such policies, but could also be reported in that section. So some calls to consolidate that. And some respondents wanted to see a more granular level breakdown of the portfolios. So at the moment, one of the categories is sectors financed, and some respondents wanted to see sort of activities financed or projects financed, calling for, that gives greater transparency rather than just stating exposure to the energy sector, what activities within the energy sector, for example. We received a lot of feedback on the engagement and stewardship disclosures that are in this section, but also sit on the likely material topics. Calls to clarify the reporting on targets and outcomes of engagement and stewardship, and also to enhance the disclosures on proxy voting, so asking for some relevant policies and statistics on votes cast. Next slide, please. Also feedback on human rights, the human rights approach across the sector standards. Some respondents asking for a stronger focus on human rights due diligence. Also some additional reporting requested on how financial institutions are managing impacts from customers and investees with regards to human rights, and some explicit calls for remediation mechanisms and outcomes, which is something that's actually quite significantly covered through the universal standards, in fact. Next slide, please. So on this likely material topic of public and customer health and safety, if you recall, this topic sat only on the insurance sector standard, and in the exposure draft, it did not sit on banking and capital markets. However, we did include a question in the survey as to whether respondents saw that as a likely material topic for those sectors as well. Not all respondents answered this question, although the majority of those that responded were in favour of including it for banking and capital markets. Since then, the team on the project has undertaken some research on those sectors, so for banking and capital markets, to really zero in on what the relevant impacts would be and any authoritative guidance on those. So you can see there some relevant impacts that have been identified for banking and capital markets, being the financing of health harmful or health promoting sectors being probably the primary one. In terms of banking, so the provision of safe and inclusive and accessible banking services, and also digital harms that could come from cybersecurity breaches, customer data breaches, for example. And on the capital market sector, also the investee stewardship to improve customer and public health and safety outcomes. Through the team's research, we found that most of the impacts that have been identified for those other two sectors are largely covered by existing likely material topics, such as financial health and inclusion, the incorporating sustainability disclosures, and customer privacy and data security topic. So we'll continue to look at this feedback in conjunction with the technical committees. And the next slide, please. Right, on the likely material topic of conflict affected and high risk areas, again, if you recall, this sat as a topic on banking and capital markets, but not on insurance. And similarly to the last slide, we did have a question in the public comment survey as to whether respondents agreed with the exclusion on the insurance sector or not. And we had mixed responses there. So some respondents in favour of that exclusion, arguing that insurance companies are not connected to the activities via direct financing in the same way that banks or investors are, excuse me. And on the other hand, respondents in favour of including that topic for insurance, citing that, there are certain insurance products that are really relevant to these contexts. And of course, they are exposed through their underwriting activities as well. So examples of these sorts of products would include things like aviation, political risk insurance, kidnap and ransom insurance that enable organizations to operate in conflict-affected areas by covering specific risks. Also, of course, by excluding or limiting underwriting for high-risk projects, insurers can influence market behavior or promote more responsible practices in these sorts of areas. We've spoken to a number of experts on this topic outside of the technical committees because it is a bit of a knowledge gap, I think, within these sector-based technical committees. What we're hearing from experts is that this is a very relevant topic. It's very important, but we're also understanding from them this is fairly new for the sectors. So the comfort level with this topic is not what it would be for a climate or a topic such as financial health and inclusion, for example. Next slide, thank you. And lastly, before we go to discussion, we did ask in the survey whether there were significant impacts that respondents felt were not sufficiently covered in the exposure drafts, and you can see the main ones here. Digitalization-related impacts, so I guess that links to what you were just speaking about before, the potential digitalization project, animal welfare, and plastic and other forms of pollution. I think it's worth mentioning that very early on in this project, we discussed digitalisation at length with the technical committees, and there was agreement that digitalisation can exacerbate impacts that were already being captured by other likely material topics for these sectors. So examples of impacts that we have already covered, things like algorithms used in decision-making around customer lending assessments, for example, also on the use of customer data and the topic of customer privacy and data security, and other impacts that are mentioned across topics such as there are impacts on financial health and inclusion, labour topics, and the prevention of corruption and financial crime that also speak to this digitalisation piece. On the topic of animal welfare, it's true that this was not deemed likely material by the technical committees, and the project team have undertaken some research on this area and have found interlinkages with other likely material topics, including climate and biodiversity, and also the potential for organisations to report on their exposure to sectors that are high risk in terms of animal welfare impacts, and that could be disclosed in the section on incorporating sustainability. Those sectors would be things like agriculture and pharmaceuticals, for example. And finally, on plastic and other types of pollution, currently, impacts of pollution are captured in the topics of water and effluent and waste. And the team is identifying how to best capture specific impacts relating to plastic. I think it's important to acknowledge that, we know that the pollution project is currently underway. And of course, this will be the best place to develop new disclosures on plastic pollution. That's where the expert group is. It's not on a sector standard or a sector standard technical committee. And of course, these disclosures can be reflected in the updated version of these standards when the alignment takes place in a year or two. And that concludes the presentation from my side, so I'm open to any comments or questions. And there's just one final slide after that, just to remind the GSSB as to where we are at in terms of timeline on this project.
Great, thank you both. While the other GSSB members are thinking of their questions, one quick question for me. I think the timeline in the slide sort of implies the answer, but I just wanted to confirm. So there's no expectation of having to re-expose. And did any of these topics that have already been identified as points of strong feedback, did any of them come close to that point where we might need to re-expose?
Thanks for the question, Jeff. Oh, Helga, did you want to say something?
Please go ahead, and then I can complement.
I think at this stage, re-exposure is looking not likely. Of course, maybe it's too early to say. We're in this revision phase right now, but I don't at this point see that happening.
Thank you. Shulendra.
Hi, Claire. I think I saw a comment on health and safety, on customer health and safety. How does that feedback get caught up in the sector standards for banking and capital markets? Do we take it in? How does that work?
Thank you. Yeah, so as I mentioned, a number of respondents did see some relevance of that likely material topic for banking and capital markets. And based on the sort of the research that the project team has undertaken since public comment, what the project team sees as being a sort of an adequate solution would actually be to cover these impacts in already existing likely material topics. There was a real lack of sort of authoritative guidance connecting these impacts specifically to the banking or the capital market sector in the same way as it is for insurance. So that's what I was trying to get across on this slide. Of course, this is not final. So the technical committees are still discussing this, and it could still change depending on their recommendations.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Obviously very clear. Oh, Helka.
Just to highlight that all the comments that we've received are now on the website. Yeah, deeper dive into those, they are available.
Excellent. Thank you. Back to you, Claire, I believe.
Thanks, Jeff. If you could just jump to the timeline slide. So yes, as I've said, we're in the standard revision phase, the second to last phase here. We are expecting to submit the final 3 individual sector standards, so there's 3 of them, to the GSSB for consideration in May next year. Thereafter, so publishing shortly thereafter, and then launching a rollout period, and as well as the standards in June.
Wonderful. Well, if no one has any other comments, then we'll take that as provided and say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now that wraps up our content sessions and the last item on the agenda. I pass it back to Carol for our recap and closeout.
Okay, thank you. I think we have done a lot of work over the last couple of days, and there's been a great deal of discussion and valuable input from GSSB members. So thank you all for that, and thank you for all the background work done by the Standards Division staff to get us here. Thank you very much. I know it's a lot of work preparing for one of these meetings. So we've approved a number of labor exposure drafts. We have approved our global reporting systems paper. Finally, it's been on the go for a long time. And we have heard an update on the financial services sector standard from the consultation. And we have also discussed our work program and prioritized the work that we want to do over the next 3 years, and the Standards Division will come back to us with an updated version next month for approval for consultation on that work program. So I think those are the highlights of our 2 days, and as well as the various work on the sector standards. And I think coming to a decision and a plan with the compact sector standards is a great thing. And we've seen the huge amount of work involved in aligning the sector standards to the topic standards and looking for a way of shortcutting that in the future. So thank you all very much. Safe travels home. See you online in December. Bastian has to have the last
We
word.
just wanted to follow up on some of the discussions related to 2 items. One is the item 14 and a proposal for the change to introduce securities commissions and stock exchanges in the table of that is provided on different stakeholders. So that is the change, recognizing them explicitly as that's one change we will apply here. And then we And we have the questions. We don't.
Read it.
Yeah. So we've also prepared, based on the discussion we had yesterday, for the labor-related standards on questions to be asked in the questionnaire that goes out with the public consultation. We developed a first draft, and we just wanted to run this past GSSB now, because that would enable us to already format the final questionnaire. So Harold will take it away and read out the questions.
So we proposed 2 questions in relation to the reporting practice. And the first question would be, are there proposed disclosures for which data is currently unavailable, not possible to collect, or difficult to obtain over time? Please explain and include the disclosure number in your response. That's the first question. But that's relate on availability of data, collecting data, etc. Then there was the, I would say, the aggregation level in relation to decision making. So the second question we will put in our questionnaires is this exposure draft critical to understanding an organization's impacts related to the topic / sector and essential for decision making for different kinds of stakeholders? Should I repeat it or? Yes. Both? First one, are there proposed disclosures for which data is currently unavailable, not possible to collect, or difficult to obtain over time? Then there will be, and please then in that case explain and include the disclosure number in your response.
Can I ask what difference we mean between unavailable and not possible to collect?
Well, it can not possible to collect, especially supply chain unavailable can be that it's never available. That was more like the thinking of it. And not possible to collect, it can be because, yeah, due to practical reasons, because it's in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4.
It may also be that there aren't the systems available just
Exactly,
now to collect it.
Yeah, like in these questions, we try to keep it open that also the one who is responding can at least have some idea of asking in 2 different ways. At least they start, they're activated to think, hey, yes, not putting too easy into the mouth, but at least give them some more clarity on the kind of question we're asking here.
Sure, not a deal breaker, but to me, if it's not available to collect, it's also unavailable. So I just thought we might be able to make it more clear for the reader, but not a mission critical item.
Preference to make it shorter?
No,
See Laura? Oh, no? Okay.
I think it's okay.
Okay, yeah,
it's fine.
thank you, Jeff, thank you.
Yeah.
The second sentence again, so the question, are the disclosures listed in this exposure draft critical to understanding an organization's impacts related to the topic, and are they essential for decision making for different kinds of stakeholders? Yeah, basically it's always in our questionnaire, so that's, yeah. And there is a box underneath it, and then they fill it in. So it's automated form, as you know, with all they can fill in the box. And we explain then, and we always say and explain.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that, to me, that question probably should be on every single PCP if it's not already, right?
So those who were concerned about disclosure overload, are you happy with those questions in getting that out? Shalendra?
Harold, I'll just probably add on the latter part of the first question to the second question as well, which I think asks the respondent to state the specific clauses he either agrees or disagrees with that.
Also for the second one?
Yes, yeah, okay. yeah.
Like the first question.
Okay, fantastic. That's all agreed. We have no loose ends. And so we just come back in December. The main item of discussion will be the updated work program, updated for the discussion that we have had today. Thank you all. See you then.
Thanks a lot.